All right, moving on. We're going to move to the second section where we're going to multiply radicals. I'm just going to go over the example. And again, I'm going to kind of relate it to when you dealt with variables. It's almost like you treat the radical like a variable. Now, if I look at this example, I know when I multiply 2x and 3x, I can just multiply the coefficients, 2 and 3. That gives me 6. And then when I multiply x times x, that gives me x squared. So kind of the main point there was just multiply your coefficients, 2 and 3, and then multiply the variables. Now, if I look at the example, I'm going to take the same exact approach. If I have 2 root 2 times 3 root 2, I can just multiply the coefficients, meaning the numbers that are not in the square root. So this 2 times 3, this gives me 6. So cross those out. And now I can multiply this. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Since they're both in the square root, I kind of use the product property. 2 times 2 is 4. So I get 6 times the square root of 4. But actually, I can take this further. Square root of 4, that's 2. Right? That's a perfect square. So I get 6 times 2, which gives me 12. Sometimes when you multiply radicals, you're going to be left with a radical. Sometimes the radicals go away, just like for this example. All right, let's do these first 3. So it's almost kind of like, really, number 1 is just like the product property. If I'm multiplying square root of 5 and square root of 12, since they're both in the square root, I could combine them. So 5 times 12 is 60, and that's in the square root. And then once you do that, just ask yourself, is there a perfect square that goes into it? And I believe there is a perfect square that goes into it. Let's see here. 4 is a perfect square that goes into it. And it goes into it 15 times. So I have root 4 times root 15. This square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 15, there's no perfect square that goes into it. So it's just 2 root 15. Right? You always make sure you're done when there's no perfect square that goes into the square root. All right, let's zoom in here to number 2. So number 2 is going to look a lot like, kind of like the warm-up or the little example that we did. So let's split this up into 2 parts. We see we have coefficients or numbers and then square roots. So I know I can only multiply this 3 with this 2. Well, that gives me 6. Okay, so I'm done with that. And then the numbers in the square root, I can multiply these. Square root of 2 times square root of 6, that gives me square root of 12. And then I know if I'm done, if there's no perfect square that goes into this 12, but there is. 4 is a perfect square that goes into it. So let's bring down the 6. I'm going to break this up to square root of 4. 4 goes into 12 3 times, so make sure both these are in the square root. And then this square root of 4 is 2. So then I have 6 times 2. This square root of 3 doesn't simplify, so I just bring that down. 6 times 2 is 12, so we get 12 root 3. That's our answer. Okay, let's move over to number 3. Looks like a very similar problem to number 2. Let's zoom in a little bit more. All right, so same thing here. This 2, I can only multiply that with this 7. So 2 times 7 gives me 14. So I'm done with the 2, done with the 7. And then I can multiply the numbers in the square roots. Square root of 6 times square root of 3. Let's see, 6 times 3 is 18. But leave that in the square root. And then let's see, square root of 18. Are there any perfect squares that go into it? Yes, there is. What, 9 goes into it? 9's a perfect square. Goes into it 2 times. So let's just bring down the 14. Okay, let's see, 9 times 2 is 18. So I just have square root of 9 times the square root of 2. And then this I know, square root of 9 is 3. So remember, I'm multiplying. This square root of 9 is 3. So it's 14 times 3. Square root of 2 doesn't simplify, so let's just bring that down. And then last thing, I can multiply these. Let's see here, 14 times 3 gives us what, 42? So we get 42 root 2, and then we're done. That doesn't simplify any further. All right, so main idea with this, when multiplying radicals, you can only multiply the actual numbers, the coefficients, and then you can only multiply the numbers within the square roots. And then just make sure to simplify the square root all the way, and then you're done.